So, hey everyone, welcome to the inaugural episode of Insights with NIC Hyderabad. We have been joined by a very special guest today, Riz Aslam from the Satori Effect. Riz has had an impressive career spanning over 15 years. He started his work as an assistant economist for the Scottish government, and right now he is a business mentor for 500 Global, one of the biggest VCs in the world. So Riz has had a very lucrative career. He has trained startups. He has founded 8 of his own and has had successful exits from 3 of them. So to say Riz is an expert on everything related to startups would be an understatement. So Riz, now that we have you here with us today, how does one go from, give us a little bit mapping of your journey. Where did you start from and how did you get to this point right now?
I started, well, I was born in Edinburgh in Scotland. Both my parents are Pakistani, and they came to, my grandfather came to the UK in the 50s and the 60s. So you could kind of say I'm like second generation British, but we have roots in Pakistan. I have family in Pakistan as well. And when my parents first came and my granddad came, they were, like most people, they were uneducated and they were very unemployable. Nobody really wanted to give foreigners a job. So my dad started his own businesses, and really that's where I got the foundation of understanding what a good business is and what it looks like to be successful. So I was very privileged to have that experience very early on. And my dad was very kind enough to make us work for him when we were as young as 12. So really, I have 15 years of my own experience, but I have another 15 years of working in my dad's businesses. By the time I was a teenager, I realized that my dad wasn't achieving the scale of business that other entrepreneurs were. And it was more to do with the lack of a knowledge than to do with his work ethic. He's a very hardworking man. And I thought the next stage was either I could follow in his footsteps and work without the knowledge and hope that one of the businesses, makes you a millionaire, as you do dream of when you're a teenager, or I could go and get an education that would enable me to understand how the world works. And so I decided to study economics, and that then, after graduating, I thought, oh, let's work and understand really how the world works. I was a very curious person. So I was lucky enough that my first job out of university was with the Scottish government. And again, I worked on areas of business for them, advising members of parliament on various activities that could increase the economic activity of an area. But within 2 years of working there, I realized again that this wasn't going to be the place where action is taken. This is a place where a conversation and debate takes place. And I found it very meaningless. So I then decided to change careers. I've had several careers. So the next career was to become an accountant. I studied accountancy. I worked for 5 years for a diverse range of corporations, from internet startups to global banks. And then finally, really the changing point in my career came when I worked at a management consultancy, which was part of Accenture now. And the great thing that I learned there was how we come up with products and scale those products and businesses. And so I had very good mentors. And from working there for about 3 years, I understood that once again, that the solution to most of the world's problems aren't going to be government, isn't going to be politics. It's actually going to be entrepreneurs, and they are the backbone of every country. So after about 7 years of professional experience, I decided to start my own businesses. Out of the 8 businesses, not all of them were successful. 2 of them did fail. There's 3 that are still running, including my consultancy business. And it gave me a really good insight into what it takes to be successful. And some of the businesses that I've started up range from healthcare clinics to recruitment companies to e-commerce businesses. And I think the key here for me to be able to do all of that successfully was not having fear of failure. I'm okay, unlike most entrepreneurs who have a fixed mindset how they view failure. I was born in the UK where failure has a different perspective to the Asian version of failure, where you feel embarrassed and you don't want to tell anybody. So I was really lucky that I didn't have that perception. And I'd seen my dad fail a couple of times as well. So for me, failure is okay. Giving up isn't okay, but failure is okay. So I was very quick to start new businesses, and if they didn't work, I was very quick to sell them and move on. And that led me into essentially about 12 years ago, where I started thinking about building a private equity fund to buy failing businesses and turn them around. I believed I had a good skill set at that point to be able to make any business a success. And so my next venture after my own startups was to buy, over the next 4 years, was to buy 5 failing businesses and turn them into successful exits too. That then naturally leads entrepreneurs a journey where they go from startup, a advisor to then investor. And then the next stage for me was to become an investor in people's businesses. So I started up a fund, a focus on property businesses specifically, because property in the UK is a very good, safe place to place your money. They always go up every single year. So I thought, even if I don't know what I'm doing in this new business, the chances are I'm going to be successful at it just because of the economy. And so by 2014, I actually was feeling very burnt out. And I decided at that point that I was going to do something new, and it wasn't going to be startups this time. I'd already done that. And each startup usually costs about 3 years of your life. If anyone here who's listening has done a startup, they know the first 2 years it's not a 9 to 5 job, it's a 9 to 9 job. You know, you have barely enough time to spend with family. So I felt really that I didn't want to go back into startups so quickly. I thought I could do this later. And I decided to buy a one-way ticket to Asia. I didn't know where I was going to go, so I just went onto a map and I figured out Malaysia sounds nice. And so I bought a one-way ticket to Malaysia to spend the next 6 months just traveling around Asia and seeing what was going on there. And as I was traveling, I realized that me giving up my business work would be not a good thing, because there's so many people in the world who've got the hard work ethic, they've got the ideas, but what they don't have is the business acumen to make the business successful. So I ended up initially working for quite a few NGOs and social enterprises, and that somehow led to back to the road of working in startups, but this time not my own startups, other people's startups. So it's a little bit easier when you're an advisor. You're telling people, you know, what the right path could be, versus having to execute that strategy on the ground. Whilst I was working for a few smaller companies, I was approached by VCs to start working on their portfolio companies, and that then led me to an introduction with 500, where at the moment I'm working with their startups. And to cut a long story short, the 172 businesses that I've worked in, you know, that's spanned over 12 years. It's not something that was done over 1 year or 2 years. And that experience has then, you know, refined how I can understand the marketplace and how to approach that marketplace and to make a success in that marketplace. But yeah, that's the long story of my background.
Impressive career that you're spanning over the course of 12 years this and 16 years working for your own father's business. So you have been looking at the Pakistani ecosystem up close, right? So purely as a bystander, where do you think the ecosystem is right now? What stage is it at?
Yeah, I've been looking at the Pakistani ecosystem for several years now, and I'm also an angel investor, a very small angel investor, and I'm always looking for entrepreneurial startups. And Pakistan attracted me for several reasons. I have already very successful family entrepreneurs who live there, family relatives, And so, these conversations with them gradually, progressed further and further. And I was very curious about, Pakistan being the fourth largest English-speaking country in the world. That's no small thing. And then with the fifth largest population, why in Pakistan there was a problem with entrepreneurship. And a lot of people would give me the same reasons. They'd always say to me, oh, it's politics, it's corruption, and the usual typical excuses you get. And I find it very hard to believe because I've worked in over 20 countries where corruption is rife, where public policy towards entrepreneurship isn't friendly. So I really didn't want to accept these were the real reasons underlying. I thought really that's excuses for me. And I've also worked with ministers of parliament in the UK. So I know that public policy doesn't really shape entrepreneurship. It's actually the other way around. Entrepreneurship actually a shift of how members of parliament are thinking and where they're going to devote their energy and resources to. So that investigation into Pakistan then started making me understand that actually the problem isn't with the culture, it's not with the politics, it's actually with how people think, how entrepreneurs think. And each of the 20 countries plus I've worked in, entrepreneurs think very differently. In the US, they have a very different mindset, as many of us know, to in Asia, where fear of failure is so heightened that we don't really want to execute something. We don't even want to share our ideas because we feel somebody's going to steal them. In the US, they don't think like that. In the UK, they don't think like that. And really, that's I think the nemesis of Pakistani entrepreneurship. It's the entrepreneurial mind that's dictating to them. And of course, from, even my own family's past experiences, they're always worried that somebody's going to take your share unfairly and that somebody's not going to support you who should be supporting you, like a lawyer or so forth. But we see these challenges in other countries too. It's not any different in Africa, for example. Yet the African entrepreneurship has been booming for the last 7, 8 years. However, Pakistan only kind of got its feet wet last year. And then unfortunately this year, what we've seen is a recession looming. We've seen inflation go up, the price of energy has gone up. And that has made the VCs very apprehensive about taking riskier bets. And so whilst last year I was seeing a lot of activity and I knew quite a few VCs were trying to get into the Pakistani ecosystem, this year they've kind of are hedging their bets and going, let's take the slow game here. Let's see what happens first. And what we'll probably see actually in the future, in the next 6 months, is there'll be very few VCs investing, although they still have their funds intact. They're ready to deploy those funds. And they're looking for superstars in Pakistan to get, as I said, the entrepreneurship mentality isn't very strong. And they want to invest in anybody. They want to invest in people who have international experience, who've traveled, for example, or who've been educated abroad, so that they're bridging the gap between the East and the West, but doing it in Pakistan. So I am very excited about what's going to happen, although the competition has all of a sudden got really tough.
Yeah, because I was thinking about how VC funding slowed down in the second quarter. There was, global economic downturn, people are being laid off their jobs. Pakistan, a lot of startups closed down or pivoted. But right now, what we're seeing is we are seeing a return to the buzz, to the former, buzz that was going on. It has been a year of first for Pakistan, biggest seed round, new investors coming in, via Sequoia coming in, D-Bank. There have been a lot of updates since then. So see that now that the activity is picking up again, is it going to go on with the same momentum? Is it going to slow down? How is it? What do you see next for Pakistan?
For Pakistan, I think the momentum is going to continue. The deal flow is going to slow down. One of the things when I speak to VCs, they don't want to take risky bets when, you could invest in Southeast Asia, which is a lot more stable. and entrepreneurs are a little bit more internationally accustomed to doing business. And whilst in Pakistan, we're very internally focused. We don't really want to scale out of Pakistan. So for VCs, the first opportunity that has the greatest yield is going to be in Africa. It's going to be in Southeast Asia initially, and then they're going to look at the smaller markets like Myanmar and Pakistan, where of course the potential is huge, but the entrepreneurs are not both emotionally and commercially ready to hit international stardom.
That makes a lot of sense. So you have worked in startups, you have founded your own, so you have had an ample experience in this area, right? So what do you think Pakistani startups are doing wrong and what they should be doing better right now? We have had cases of, startups that have been acquired by bigger brands. We have had cases of startups that were poised to become the next unicorn of Pakistan but have had to shut down their operations. So we have had a lot of cases, a lot of different things happening. So what do you think, what is going wrong and where?
I don't think the things that are going wrong are unexpected, actually. It goes back to the culture of entrepreneurship in Pakistan that's very specific to Asia. And that is that because we have a high fear of failure, what will, our status matters to us, our reputation matters to us. How much we earn is one of the first points of conversation for most people. And until we get past that and we're okay with failing, and it's better to fail fast than to fail slowly, get past that fear of failure. I think what we'll see is a more courage. So I think we lack a little bit of courage. We also lack the lens of international wisdom, let's say. We can learn a lot from other countries. I personally, started working with VCs not because of the financial gain that I was going to get from it. It was actually the commercial exposure that I was going to get from it. I started working with Citibank at the beginning of my career because I wanted to learn what are the best systems and processes in the world in business, and so that I can learn them and copy them in my own business. When we think like that we can learn so much from other people rather than going, I'm great from the word get go, we have a very different view of how we should approach problems. I'm a person who I'm happy to work for other people as long as I'm learning something. But in Pakistan, we all just want to be rich and famous without maybe getting the experience that's necessary to be, to get to that level in life. So really the entrepreneurial mentality, as I said, is one that we have fear of failure. The second one is we don't want to try new things. We're very cautious, and we're too cautious of what other people say and think. And when we get rid of what other people think and say, and we just follow our own hearts and our own inspiration, I think we'll get past this little roadblock that we have. And it's only a temporary roadblock. We're seeing, I'm seeing so many Pakistani natives studying abroad or working in businesses. And when I speak to them, their mindset is one of a growth mindset. So they're already going back to Pakistan with, amazing ideas, amazing learnings that they've learned from world-class corporations, and they're going to be bringing that back into Pakistan. So I have high hopes.
So it basically boils down to the type of founder that is heading a startup, right? Because there are some key traits that are going to identify and make, people like you can possibly identify what are the key traits that can make a startup make or break. So what do you think what is it like ideal startup founder that can, make or break a startup, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think there's about 5 qualities that I personally look for at the beginning, and they're the same 5 qualities I look at before I decide whether a failing business can be turned around or not. And the number one is the entrepreneur's mindset. Is it a growth mindset, or is it one of fear of competition even? The reason we don't want to share our ideas is because we fear that the competition or somebody's going to steal them. Well, if you're working from that viewpoint, you're not really a growth mindset. So I think that's the first thing that I'm looking to evaluate. The second thing is the leadership. Now, there's two types of entrepreneurs as I see things. One's just an entrepreneur. The second one's an entrepreneurial leader. And the entrepreneurial leader has many more qualities than an entrepreneur has. An entrepreneur is good at building a business around an opportunity. An entrepreneurial leader is good at doing that too, but he's also good at inspiring a team. And when you look at all the successful businesses that were built in the last 100 years, they weren't built from one person. They were built from a team of people that were inspired by a leader. And that leader was a role model. He lived the values that were conducive to letting the team do their own thing and not micromanaging them. And I guess the third quality coming on to micromanaging is that I often see one of the biggest failures in, so I've worked in startups that are failing because the entrepreneur refuses to hire people smarter than him. He wants to be the smartest person in the room. And once again, the ego here comes into play. If we hire people who are not smarter than us, then they're going to not deliver good work. If we hire people who are smarter than us, they're going to do our job first. We don't need to come up with the good ideas. We don't need to come up with the solutions to the problems. Our team who's smarter than us can do that. And there's many famous entrepreneurs that support that concept. The fourth quality I would say is international experience. Working for an international business will show us, what are the steps that are needed at different stages of growth in a business. If you're at seed level, there's certain stages that you need to go through. And if you're at growth phase, there's another set of stages that you need to go through. And at scaling phase, there's another set. And each of these phases have certain systems and processes that you need to build into your business to make sure that it can survive each stage. And that's again, I say it's a quality. It really isn't a quality, it's a system that needs to be in place. And the system, again, is initiated by the entrepreneur and his team. And the fifth thing I would really say is being okay with failure as a team. I keep talking about this point a lot because in Asian society, not just in Pakistan, across all of Asia, this is one of the hardest hurdles to overcome. And we talked about fear of failure externally, but also like being okay with failure within a team, being okay with putting your hand up and saying, oh, I messed this one up. I made a mistake. I made a really bad assumption. And if the leader can do that, it gives the team the permission to also make mistakes and be okay with it. And the key to making mistakes is not that you should make mistakes or fail, but actually to fail quickly and to fail early so that you learn from those what works, what doesn't work down the line. If you prolong this failure phase for 10 years, then you won't be successful for a very long time. And if you catalyze these failures early, these are learning lessons. The quicker you learn, the faster you'll be successful. So I think these are like really the 5 things I would advise Asian entrepreneurs, not just Pakistani, but Asian entrepreneurs to like try and think about and to build into their business.
So now that Pakistan is trying to scale up and entrepreneurs are trying to take their businesses to the next level, do you have any other words of wisdom for them? Anything they should be looking for? Anything they should be?
Yeah, I mean, some of the Pakistani entrepreneurs that I speak to, they're very focused on getting funding. And in my startups, I never went for investment. I never went to investors. I believe that if you can't bootstrap the startup, meaning using sales revenue to build the startup and to secure its sustainability, then you shouldn't really be in business. Now, in certain industries, you can't apply that theory because, for example, in tech, there are certain businesses in tech that need to invest in the tech before they can really get the first customer. But generally speaking, I feel that if you can't bootstrap the business, then it's probably not a good business. And the VCs and angel investors and family offices see through that immediately. They can see that the reason that you're asking for funding is because you're not strong enough to grow the business. And that means learning, key skills like sales and marketing. If you have those key skills under your belt, very rarely do those entrepreneurs run to VCs for money. They won't run. They'll know that they can get the sales in that they will use to grow the business, the team, improve the product, and attack new markets with that. So that's probably one of the key things that I'm telling entrepreneurs, that there's currently in the last few years, there's a fashion to go, oh, I was funded by a VC. Personally, I don't think that's something that you should really be too proud of, because to me, that means you weren't able to grow the business out of hard grit and fit. And you don't have the full set of business skills to make this a sustainable business. You needed outside capital to help you. So that's one aspect of thinking why you should or shouldn't go for VC money. The second piece of advice I can give most Pakistani entrepreneurs, when we're approaching VCs, it's essentially we're marketing ourselves to them. Yeah, they're buying into you, they're buying into your team, then they're buying into the product and the opportunity. But the first thing is they're buying into you. And any sense of desperation, any sense of unpreparedness or not understanding the VC world is going to land you with many, many no's, even if you've got a great product and great traction, and even if you have a massive market opportunity for that. And it's really how we present ourselves to the outside world. And this now probably covers quite a few different topics, but Pakistan didn't have a good reputation abroad because we weren't able to sell ourselves as a place where you should be going on holiday, a place where you should be doing business, a place where you should, even friends, you shouldn't be making friends with Pakistan. In international communities, Pakistan's reputation up until certainly a few years ago was very negative. And it's because we lack the ability to sell ourselves. If you go to Singapore or if you go to Malaysia, and they now know, especially the young generation, and I'm talking about under 30s here, they know how to sell themselves. They know how to talk about the positive aspects of their country rather than only talking about the negative aspects. And we know if we meet, usually if I meet a Pakistani or if I hear someone, if I overhear someone, they're often complaining, for example, politics or religion or corruption. This happens in every country. The UK is not immune to corruption, nor is the USA. There's just a different medium of corruption there. But corruption is everywhere. So let's stop complaining about the negative aspects of the environment that we live in, and actually showing off the positiveness that we live in, the way that we forgive each other very quickly, the way that we're an entrepreneurial society. And we're entrepreneurial society because for many, many generations, that's how our livelihoods were done by our grandparents. So we're not new entrepreneurs to this. We're not new on the scene. We have an ancestral history of entrepreneurship. Let's show that off more than the negative aspects.
Okay, just one last question for you. Which one is your favorite Pakistani startup and why?
Oh, I don't think that's a fair question to ask me. Firstly, I'm not well versed with the ecosystem there, and if I mention a startup, then it's only based on very limited information. So I prefer not to answer that question. But I would say in Pakistan that are thinking in the right way. Some of them have been in the news. I like to follow their stories rather than try and introduce myself to them, because I want to see how they're behaving. I want to see, how they're interacting not only with the local VCs, but especially with the international VCs. Being an entrepreneur means you need to wear many, many hats, and you need to be a leader in your team. You need to be an opportunity seeker in your product or your service, and you also need to be a really good communicator. And the communication comes in, especially when we're reaching growth and scaling phases, because to be successful, we need to be able to harness strategic alliances, do joint ventures. And if we're only thinking about a local region, well, then your startup isn't really going to scale or grow. So hence, the ability to communicate with an international audience is key. And probably that's what I'm looking at when I'm thinking of my favorite startups in Pakistan.
Very diplomatic answer, but I'll take it. So
Yeah. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining.
Sorry, you got cut out there. Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's okay. I just heard you. You're back. Yeah.
No, I have many. I'll keep my answers to myself. I don't want to play favorites. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure startups and everybody watching this will have a lot to learn from you, and we hope to have you on here again. Thank you so much.